Okay, so I think this is one that many people can relate to. So I hope this video gets a lot of views. Feel free, I don't usually say this, but feel free to share the video around anywhere, social media, wherever. I want this sort of video to be seen. And the subject is this, basically anyone who's ever felt that they were screwed over by a boss, by an employer, um, might be interested in this video. I'm not going to come out with some gems about how to deal with that exactly, but I've been there more times than enough, and it's a very unpleasant feeling. So what am I talking about? I'm not just talking about an unpleasant boss that's difficult to work with. I'm talking about someone who's downright corrupt. Now, I've been in situations where I wasn't even paid. I think it's rife in certain industries. I think this sort of exploitation, and I think that's the right word because you're being exploited. Your services as a worker are being exploited, as a staff member, as an employee. You're putting in the time and effort, and you get screwed over. So that's exploitation. Um, I think it's rife within the catering industry. I think it's very commonplace in hotels, restaurants around the world, and it's very sad that people are so selfish and corrupt that they don't really care how they treat their staff. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying this is like the case in every single restaurant or business. Obviously, it's not. But I think part of the problem is even in countries where there are labour laws, they're not often enforced. I mean, realistically, if you get a restaurant, for example, they have a 17-year-old waiter and they don't pay the waiter for whatever reason, um, what choices does that waiter have? They can quit, in which case they're no longer being exploited, but they don't get the money that they have earned, or they can try and make some sort of complaint. But the problem with that is, even if they go to some sort of employment tribunal and it's ruled that they were treated unfairly, then there's going to be a negative atmosphere. So really, I think the cards are stacked against the employee who's being screwed over. Um, just for the record, I'm not making this as a sort of a hardcore socialist thing. I'm not anti-business. I think there's a lot of good employers out there. I think there's a lot of people who have done well. They've had a successful business and they've treated their employees well. I mean, to me, it's just common sense. If you want people to be productive workers, you treat them well. You pay them on time. You pay them fairly. The Conservative Party, their opposition to the minimum wage was not only wrong, but it was actually they were on the wrong side of history. Because what did they claim back in the late 90s? They said, oh, the minimum wage will make businesses go bust. It will be bad for businesses. That never transpired. Actually, under the Blair years, the economy was doing pretty well. So that was misleading. That's one of the main reasons I could never vote Tory. I think they are on the wrong side when it comes to basic workplace fairness. Sure, they'll come out with rhetoric that they're against exploitation and so on, but they've always been on the wrong side of that debate. And I think there is a fundamental. I mean, I didn't intend to make this about party politics, but it does come into it. There's a fundamental survival of the fittest mentality among conservative in the conservative thinking. It's basically the most important thing is profit. If a business does well, that's good for the economy. So the only thing that matters is helping out business owners, small business owners. That's a big thing. Um, I've respect for people who set up a business. I think it's a daunting process. I think, I've respect for people who can set up a business and provide employment. That's good for society. But even small businesses can be corrupt. We sometimes get into this idea that small businesses are squeaky clean. No, some of them are corrupt. Just because it's small doesn't mean that they're above um, doing immoral things like screwing over their workforce. Um, and I'm under no illusions. It's a difficult thing. I know that small business owners are under a lot of pressure, but I don't think there's any excuse to screw people over unless you're being upfront with them. Like if you say to your staff, look, this is going to be a difficult month. I'm sorry, your payment may be late or it may be this. If they're upfront, I think that's different. But I have been in a situation, I was a waiter 3 times, and I hate to say it, but in all 3 times, in some way, I was screwed over. Now, people will think, oh, you're making excuses, but no, I've had lots of jobs where I was treated fairly, where I was paid on time. So it's not just like I've got a problem with, taking orders or something like that. Not at all. I just think it is a very common problem in the catering industry, and it makes my blood boil, to be quite honest, that people could put in the time and effort to work for someone, and then they're basically screwed over. They're not paid. In my case, I wasn't paid. I wasn't paid that week, not even underpaid. I wasn't paid on the grounds that supposedly tables hadn't been wiped properly. Therefore, they were going to deduct our wages for that week. Now, I'm sure it was illegal at the time. And well, it is illegal. But I didn't have the self confidence to defend myself. I was only 17 at the time. I didn't have the self confidence to say, "Wait a second, that's wrong." I mean, even if it had been a case that the tables weren't wiped properly, which wasn't true, but even if that was true, it's just illegal to not pay someone. What you would do is, reprimand them, say, "Do a better job next time," but you can't just not pay someone. Um, this sort of abuse of power absolutely disgusts me. And I hope that anyone who's watching this, you may be in a situation where you may be working in a restaurant, you may be working in a hotel, it may be another line of work. This is very widespread. There are not many people who love their job, and most jobs come with a degree of pressure, and that's okay. I can deal with that, but I don't mind pressure. I don't mind working hard if I know there's an incentive, if I'm getting fairly paid. But if I work for someone and they exploit my services as a worker and then I don't get paid, it's disgusting. So I think the law needs to be more assertive. I think that there need to be more avenues for employees to have rights at work. And yeah, that's a left wing viewpoint. It's something the Labour Party has generally been much stronger on than the Tories. But on this area, I mean, you'll never trust the Tories to do something like that because their only interest is the philosophy is okay, well, the businesses are doing well, then it doesn't really matter about the means. As long as they're doing well, that's good for the economy. I don't think the Tories give a shit about employee rights because they've never proven that they have. They've never proven that they do. I'm not saying that every Conservative is a bad person. I am not saying that everyone who votes Tory is pro exploitation. Of course, I'm not saying that, but it's just their track record. Um, I mean, to me, a good, strong business is one that treats its employees well. This isn't rocket science. If you're treating people well, they're going to be more motivated. They're going to be better workers, which is good for you as a business person. It's good for the business. It's not a radical position. Anyway, different countries have different laws. In Britain, I think this is a big problem. I think our employment laws are not as strong as other parts of Europe, and I think that I mean, I don't know how it compares to the US or Canada. I'd imagine there's some similarities. But, the way I see it is if someone is sacked unfairly, they can go to an employment tribunal for unfair dismissal. But unless I'm mistaken, I don't know if there is any avenue if someone, for example, hasn't been paid on time or underpaid or they feel that they're being treated unfairly. And I haven't even covered workplace bullying, which causes no end of unhappiness, anxiety, stress, mental anguish. And that isn't always from the boss. In fact, sometimes, to be fair here, sometimes even someone in the senior position can themselves find that they're being bullied by a group of workers who've kind of got together and they're deciding to give that person a hard time. So it does work both ways. Um, wouldn't life would be better, the overall quality of life would be better if people just had a bit of empathy and they just treated people fairly. And, a lot of businesses do, but we still have a very serious problem in this country and across the world: workplace bullying, exploitation, and just people being treated unfairly. I mean, it's not unreasonable to say that if someone is working for someone else, they need to be reliable workers. That's fine. That's a fair requirement. Be reliable, be hardworking, put in, do what they're told, but give them fair wages. This is not rocket science. It's just, and I'm just talking about developed countries. I mean, don't even get me started on the situation in parts of the world where there are no labor laws. I mean, we've heard horror stories from China about people who work in Apple factories and so on. It's horrendous. I've got Chinese friends, and the stories they've told me about the way some of the things their bosses do, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. So this is it's a problem across the world. But anyone watching this, if you're unhappy in your workplace, it's not for me to give advice. What I would do is, if you can, don't continue to suffer, leave the job. I don't know if that's a possibility, because the problem is a lot of people just don't have that choice because they have dependents. They have to pay bills and so on. So I think governments need to enact stronger legislation to give workers and employees rights. This might sound socialist. So be it. So be it. I'm not a socialist, but it's one area where, how could anyone rationally say that it's unreasonable for employees to be treated fairly? Why is that unreasonable? Why is that radical?